Good morning and welcome to the first edition of Research Fantasy Presents our NFL preseason breakdown for Thursday, August 10th, 2017. I plan on doing a video for every slate over 2 games now that we're past the Hall of Fame game. Should definitely be an interesting situation tonight. Let's talk a couple of quarterbacks I really like at this point. Brett Hundley of the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers has no need to play in the preseason. He's beyond that. Hundley's a guy I think that they do want to get out there and get seen because I think he could be a somewhat valuable trade chip coming down the line here as his contract winds down. He did well in the preseason last year, and you want guys who are going to get on the field. Joe Webb was on the field for 2 quarters yesterday. Would have been he was probably in some tournament winning lineups. That's a pretty solid guarantee I can make there. So I want to have some exposure to Brett Hundley tonight. Same goes for what I thought would be Jacoby Brissett, but could in fact be Jimmy Garoppolo. I've been reading reports out of New England that they're really not happy with Jacoby Brissett's progress in training camp. Tom Brady might play a series or 2, but that would give Brissett probably the first half, maybe into the second half. I could definitely see this being a situation where Garoppolo plays half the first quarter, all of the second quarter, and all of the third quarter, giving Brissett just the scraps. It's a tough situation to try to figure out. Neither one have supposedly had good camps, but I've heard that Brissett's has been especially brutal. I think that they'll likely give a little more time to Garoppolo tonight. Those would be my 2 favorite options. I'm going to give you 2 running backs I like. I think it starts with Samaje Perine of the Washington Redskins. He's in an interesting position where he isn't the starter on the team. I do think that they'll want to get him some work. It's irrelevant who the opponent is because if he's going to play 2 quarters, I think that the likelihood of him seeing a generous amount of touches and attention in the pass game, which is something he was able to do at Oklahoma, not as well as his teammate Joe Mixon, but he could still get it done. I think he makes for a high upside play in this situation. D'Angelo Henderson is another guy who pops to me from the Denver Broncos. Pretty highly touted. I believe he came out of Coastal Carolina, who should be moving into the big time this year. Was hyped coming out of the draft. Later round pick, so I think that you could see him get a pretty decent amount of burn here. And the Broncos always need to evaluate their running back position since by the middle of the year they'll be using 5 or 6 of them a game anyway. Moving to wide receiver, a couple of names that jumped out at me. Dede Westbrook. Right now, he's going to be vying for time on the special teams, which probably has you saying, why in the world would I be playing a guy who's looking for time on the special teams? Well, you didn't let me finish my sentence. That's the added bonus. He's likely to be returning kicks and punts. He's got an explosive playmaking capability. The reality of the situation is he's a highly talented player. He can definitely get things done. There was a reason he was invited to the Heisman ceremony last year. Didn't win, obviously, but still showed very well. He should be seeing a lot of time in the second half with the third-team Patriots defense. I think he's got the talent written all over him to transcend that. Would not be a shocker if he was the highest-scoring wide receiver on the slate. I have a couple of other guys I like. Carlos Henderson, Tommy Lee Lewis. I wrote up Drew Morgan, and I still buy into that. But doing some more research, there's 2 training camp battles I think you should pay attention to. Marvin Hall and Josh McGee battling in Atlanta for a roster spot, probably 4th receiver, maybe 5th, and Jakeem Grant and Leonte Carew in Miami battling out for their 4th wide receiver position. All these guys should see extensive time in the preseason tonight and forward to try to hash out what their role on the team is. I really like the upside of all of those guys tonight. Finally, let's talk a few tight ends. Seth DeValve from the Cleveland Browns. Look, I mean, they're playing New Orleans, which is basically the extent of a glorified Pop Warner football team, and then you have defensively. Then you have the fact that DeValve might not play with the starters. I think they will probably put Njoku out there, leaving Seth DeValve with a second-rate, fourth-rate defense. That's a lot of goodness to ask for, and tight ends are really a tough thing to figure out in the preseason. Rico Gaithers was basically the only slam dunk, and granted it was only 2 games, but one team very heavily used it. Actually, both teams yesterday really heavily used their tight end. So I think there's some merit in using Seth DeValve. If not, I'm looking at Nick Boyle, the Baltimore Ravens. There's no bodies. Like, I can't imagine Ben Watson coming out here and running around for 2 quarters. Crockett Gilmore was waived with an injury. Larry Donnell was signed, but he's banged up. Like, there's just no competition. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for a situation where there's depth chart issues. There's not a lot of guys around him that are likely to take time away from him. I don't think he's a huge upside player, but the reality is if he can play for 3 quarters, I don't care. He's likely to see more than most of the other tight ends on the slate. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. I think there's 2 games, and hopefully they'll roll that into a Saturday slate as well. I don't want to just do a video on 2 games. Nonetheless, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel below. Check us out at researchfantasy.com, and we'll see you again tomorrow.